We are going on. Yeah, there we go. Morning, everybody, and welcome to Talking Niagara this morning with myself, Peter Giblett, and him, Dave Wheeler. So this is Tuesday, December 3rd. We're getting on. We're getting on in the era, Dave. It's like
Yes,
you've got to be
yes, we are.
final thoughts of 2024, isn't it?
Yeah, 2024 is almost over with. It's hard to believe. It was a fast year. They're getting faster as they go older, anyway. Uh,
I don't believe so. I don't believe so.
well, it's true. I mean, it's true. It's anyone tell you that. Anyone that's older can tell you that it's all been a flash.
Well, you see, a young man like myself doesn't need to hear that.
Yeah. Well, anyway. So the first
I
thing
don't have to laze around. I
Go
don't have to laze around in the apartment all day like an old man.
ahead. Yeah. Well. This
Okay,
is
you were talking.
okay. Go ahead.
Go on. Anyway. Finish. That's
Yeah,
okay.
we just we talked about, and this is old news already about Biden's pardon, Hunter Biden's pardon. But one thing I didn't realize yesterday, it's unprecedented in the fact that it absolves Hunter Biden from the crimes that he is facing now that he's being accused of. But what I didn't realize, which is unprecedented, usually pardons come after a person has served time in jail. But this is so that was unprecedented in that way that he is being absolved of crimes that he's about to be charged or convicted on in court just a couple weeks from now. But I didn't realize the total extent of the pardon. The pardon goes back to 2014, 10 years. And it goes back to January 1st, 2014. That's a whole 10 years. No one's got a 10-year pardon like this before. And it absolves him not only for the crimes that he has committed, but any crime that comes to light thereafter. In other words, he is now absolved from all the crimes that he committed from January 1st to now. No crime can he be convicted of during that time, which tells us that Biden is very worried about the crimes that his son committed that no one knows about yet or haven't explored yet. The Congress.
So this is kind of a statement to the FBI: stay away, stay away. Yeah.
Well, it's more a fence around Biden from the Congress, who have long suspected that his dealings in Ukraine, the Burisma dealings that he started in April 2014, were full of criminal activity, or at least the possibility of it, in an attempt to enrich the Biden family. However, the reason why it was January 1st, that's 10 years. That's unprecedented. Like the only pardon in history that is nearly as closely completely thorough of this is the pardon that President Ford gave to Richard Nixon. And he only gave it to him for 5 years. And so he absolved him from any possible crime that Nixon could have committed for 5 years. This is for 10 years. And one of the reasons why it goes back 10 years is because anything earlier than that, he can't be prosecuted again because it's past the state.
Tried for anyway, yeah.
Yeah, because it's past the, what do they call it? Past the anyway, you can't be prosecuted for crimes if they're so old. You know that, you should know the term of that.
Yeah.
There's
a statute of limitations on. Well, you see, here's the thing: there's a statute of limitations on most crimes in America of either 6 or 7 years. However, murder goes back longer. Murder is forever.
Yeah, so they're not worried about anything murder, but the statute of limitation. He can't be charged for anything before January 1st, 2014 anyway, because it's the statute of limitations. That's why they picked that date, and also because it corresponds with the time in which he was in Ukraine. So
Yeah.
the president has given his son the most extensive pardon of anyone anywhere, and absolves him from any crime from 2014
And
on. So they obviously suspect that he had criminal dalliances from 2014 on.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. And Mike makes the point: if your family member is not elected, they should have no business or power in government. Absolutely. Morning, Chris. Morning, Karen. Morning, Mike.
Hi,
And
everyone.
morning,
How's
any
it
others
going?
who are watching. Yeah, morning, any others who are watching. We've got at least 5 people watching this morning right now.
Good show. Well,
So,
I just did a little
good
bit of a
morning,
shout out
early
to
bird.
Karen. Just a little bit of a shout out to Karen. When I was in the studio on Sunday night, there was a fellow there named Rich. And so we, who was running the studio that night, and I mentioned Karen. Karen, he knew about Karen in their show on Sundays. I think it's Sundays.
There you go. Yeah, I believe so as well. Yeah. All right. So moving on, a croc mother had reproduction via parthenogenesis. Right. In other words, she had a virgin birth.
Yes, I had the notes on this somewhere, but I can't find them now. Yeah, I wrote them a couple days ago. Yeah, so this is the science one for Chris.
And good morning,
You were
Randy.
asking for science.
Good morning, Randy.
Yeah, so you were asking for science science articles. Well, this is one. This is a very interesting one. There is a crocodile, a female who is 16 years old, that has never been anywhere near a male crocodile, and yet she has had some eggs. She laid some eggs. This is unusual, but not too unusual for a reptile to female to lay eggs, even if they haven't come anywhere close to a male. But in this particular, almost all of them are infertile. It's just something that happens from time to time. Well, for 16 years, she's never laid an egg, and now she laid a.
Well,
I think
as far as I'm aware, most animals that can produce eggs do so at a regular basis. But if they haven't had any reproductive sperm in them, they can't. Of course, those eggs are not doing anything, right?
Well, some animals can reproduce asexually at different times of their cycle, particularly if, let's say, in droughts or something like that, and there's small pools of water. Some tiny fish can reproduce asexually for a time before they reintroduce to other fish that are males. But in this particular case, she's never been exposed to a male, so I've obviously never mated. And after 16 years, she lays some eggs. But the fascinating thing about this is I think about 7 of them actually had fetuses in them, or embryos of some kind, and one of them actually started to develop, but did not had what ultimately came to the point where it had more what a stillbirth. Another thing, it was not born live. Now this is very important because this shows.
Did they name the croc Mary?
What? Yeah.
Did they name the croc Mary?
I don't think so. I think you're going to get in trouble with that one for some rather religious people, maybe. But the significance of this is that it shows that crocodiles or other kind of reptiles can reproduce without the usual method of male and female mating. This one is in Costa Rica, and her name is So the process by which she was able to procreate, or almost procreate, is called parthenogenesis, and so that means it can reproduce. So this kind of Coqueta, I think her name is, or Coquita. Coquita is her name, and she's lived in the Costa Rican zoo for 16 years, and it laid a clutch of eggs in 2018. One of the eggs was later found to contain a fully formed crocodile fetus, despite the fact that Coquita lived virtually her entire life in isolation and almost no chance that she has consorted with male crocodiles. So this is clear evidence presented for the first time in the paper published in Biology Letters in June 7th that the crocodiles are capable of a type of reproduction called parthenogenesis, in which unfertilized eggs can yield an offspring.
Right. So Mike is asking, could this rewrite the Genesis theory? Which came first, the chicken or the egg?
What came first, the crocodile or the egg? And in this particular case, but of course, this is very, very interesting. It shows the possibility of certain kind of animals to recreate themselves without mating. And then in this particular case, it's very possible that Coquita could have, if she does now have another clutch of eggs some other time, and if she goes through the process the crocodiles do, where she buries the eggs under a lot of rotting vegetation. The rotting vegetation adds heat to the eggs, and crocodiles don't depend on chromosomes like we do. We have the X and Y chromosome. They don't. The crocodile sex is determined about the range of heat in which each egg is incubated under. So some of the crocodiles would be incubated at a certain temperature, would become females, and the others would become males. In other words, she could repopulate the stream with males and females through the process of parthenogenesis, which is fascinating for scientists, which may explain why crocodiles were one of the reptiles that survived the great extinction event 65 million years ago.
Yeah, the interesting thing is about this is that I presume now that people who have crocs in zoos around the world are probably going to go looking at those eggs to check whether they actually do have anything in them, and just don't just assume they're empty.
Yeah, so crocodiles female crocodiles that haven't been mated will from time to time lay a clutch of eggs. In this particular case, she was all of 16 years old already. And I don't know, where there are males, this doesn't happen. Of course, males and females mate. But I kind of extended my ideas on this when I read it, that crocodiles will survive the great extinction event, and a lot of reptiles survived the great extinction event of 65 million years ago, whereas all the other reptiles, major reptiles, the pterosaurs and the dinosaurs, died out. So that might be part of the natural strategy that got crocodiles past that extinction event.
Yeah, it could be, because they were some of the oldest creatures on the planet right now.
Yeah, they predate dinosaurs anyway. So and here you go. Well, it actually says, how does parthenogenesis work? And here's kind of like a homage to you here, in a sense. parthenogenesis is not exactly immaculate conception. Any offspring produced in this manner shares most of the DNA with the mother. And the process can only occur in animals with certain types of chromosomes and the ability to pass the genes in a specific manner. In short, this type of reproduction can happen if humans or other mammals, because they use a type of genomic imprinting that requires a specific set of genes to be switched on by the male and a specific set of genes by the female to form an embryo. It is said we all start off as females at the very, very beginning of our at conception. We all begin as females and would end up being females if not for the Y chromosome at a certain point getting some sort of signal and then kicking in to take that particular fetus and begin to develop it as a male. So and the whole, okay, go ahead.
But the interesting thing here is researchers have also created mice by parthenogenesis in the lab. So they had to go pretty extreme gene editing, switching on and switching off genes at the right time.
Yes. They can also take female eggs that are already female and from those clone them continuously to create life. But that's inside the lab. This is in nature. So that's the significance of it. And we've nature has decided, Mother Nature's decided the way in which to make any species stronger is to vary them, and that is up to the males to do. So they created a male, basically, and the males are that agency which varies the genetic variants of any kind of species, because the males introduce more and more different variances through the Y chromosome. So that's how nature sort of got made its species stronger. But here, if you go back earlier in evolutionary history, you can see that early animals don't need that chromosome. They create their males and females in heat of incubation of their eggs.
But okay, so they're also saying that that crocodiles may be similar to other ancient reptiles in that they could all do this kind of stuff, right? But for whatever reason, the rest of the reptiles didn't survive.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. As a matter of fact, here it goes. It does talk about Jurassic Park in a way. It's very likely that dinosaurs and pterosaurs also had the ability to produce parthenogenically, he said jokingly. That is very reticent of Jurassic Park. I think he's doing a bit of a reach there. He is they are early reptiles, but crocodiles, I believe, are even earlier than the dinosaurs. So whether or not the dinosaurs and pterosaurs had that ability is yet to is suspected, but not. And if they did, why didn't they survive the extinction event of 65 million years ago?
Yep.
Anyway, it opens a lot of doors for scientists. They're very excited about this whole thing. And so I thought there's something that of science for Chris. Something of very
okay. So yeah, and moving on, low literacy levels among U.S. adults could cost the American economy billions, so said Forbes. But what I find interesting about this is that the person who writes this, the person who puts the headline up, can't obey the rules of writing headlines because they capitalize every single word, including the minor irrelevant words, in their capitalization. So clearly, we've got a problem.
Well, normally it is the editor that does that. So the illiterate one then would be the editor, not the writer of the article. Yep. Now this talks about a new study by Gallup on behalf of Barbara Bush Foundation for the Family Literacy finds that low levels of adult literacy can be costing the U.S. as much as $2.2 trillion a year.
Wow.
It is staggering the literacy rates illiteracy rates in the United States. We've heard about this over and over again. Way back in George Bush II's administration, he tried to get the No Child Left Behind education process going, where it's very, very clear that it depended on.
That's actually one of the reasons he was in the school in 9/11, at 9/11, of course, part of that program of his.
Yes. And I'll point out that what was very, very clear at the time was that children of poorer children, children of humble means, basically, had got a much poorer education, and they were left on their left foot, basically, from the time they were children because they didn't get an adequate education. That, of course, you zero in Black communities and Hispanic communities. Those were in the poorer neighborhoods.
Yeah, it's interesting that you see one of the things that I remember from my childhood, and I'm grateful for from my childhood, is that my mum and my dad, we weren't rich, but my mum and dad basically stuck books in our hands when we were 2 or 3. You know, when we could first get to a point where we could start reading. You know, we started reading early and kept reading.
Well, the education system is the means by which most of us learn how to read and write and do arithmetic.
Yeah.
And this is staggering. 130 million people lack proficiency in literacy in the United States. That's nearly
130 million.
That's nearly 1/3 of the population. And if you look at the adult population, it would be a full third of the adult population, at least, that do not have proficiency in literacy. Now that means they have the reading below the equivalent of a grade 6 grade. That's the line in which they draw.
How much of this exists within our own system within Canada here? Because there's often many parallels with Canada in US stats.
Well,
right? Mike is saying low literacy, okay, go on.
The literacy rates in Canada are better than the United States. The United States is one of the lowest literacy rates in the developed world. And I believe that's largely due to the stratification of society. So if you take our own minorities, let's say if you go to the reservations or something like that, or where the indigenous people live, they usually live in poorer circumstances with less resources. And I will wager that there are less indigenous people. There are more indigenous people that have higher illiteracy rates. I think, and people who are isolated too, that may live like the Missouri type of, hillbilly type. You'll find a lot of illiteracy rates in poor whites as well, but quite often the common dividend here is the money by which the socioeconomic zone in which a person grows up in. Another factor is culture, and we find that is Asians, for one thing, excel in schools, and yet they may come from humble backgrounds, They may not have a whole lot of resources, but in their culture, it is very important to do well in school, and and that is responded to, and that is very clear when you look at the schools. Let's say in Toronto, they've done a study in Toronto, or done work in Toronto, and they have found that Asians are the ones that excel. South Asians and Far Asians are the ones that excel. Whites do pretty ordinary; they're in the middle, and blacks do the worst, the most, the worst in schools. It's not that they're any less intelligent; it's because of the cultural response.
Yeah. All right. So hang on a minute. So low literacy levels have caused a psycho to get elected in the US, says Mike. Thanks for the Science Friday on Tuesday, Dave. Says it would have been Monday had we gotten to it, Chris, but we just didn't get to the article. We were one article shy of it. Okay, and what are the rules for headline capital letters? Yeah, that's an interesting question, because essentially what the rules used to be is that you would capitalize names, and you would capitalize nouns and pronouns, and obviously the first and last items on the first and last items on the title. So, an apple wins the election, and would always be capitalized, election would always be capitalized, and the rest would obey those other rules. Apple would be capitalized because of it being a noun.
How about a pumpkin won the election?
Again, pumpkin would be capitalized. Okay, so low literacy is just one angle. The what people are learning and aware of at upcoming stages of their lives now are not the lessons that are likely to be required. Is this why not why we have chicken littles in our world that are not smart enough to get to reasonable conclusions? Good question there, Andy.
Yeah.
In fact, let's leave that up for a minute or two, so that everybody can actually finish reading it, if you didn't finish reading it. Thoughts, Dave?
Well, my thoughts are well, definitely the United States is losing money, and it says it's losing money because of the literacy rates, because those people who are they break them down into three basic levels. Level 3 are the people that are read below, are nearly completely illiterate. Level 2 are those people who can read up to a grade 6 level, and level 3 are those past that. So if you look at just those very basic levels, those people in the lowest level, of course, are making much less money. The ones in the middle level are making better money, and the ones that have literacy do much better financially. I don't think that's much of a surprise to us.
It should not, but it should not be really, because in fact, and probably the vast number of those that have got literacy problems are not level 3. Was probably the number of level 3 is probably proportionally the same as it was in the 1920s and 1930s, but the proportion of level 2 has probably been on the rise for quite some time now.
Yeah, it says here, commenting on the significance of the study, British A. Robinson, president of the CEO of the Barbara Bush Foundation, said America's low literacy crisis is largely ignored, historically underfunded, and woefully under-researched, despite being one of the great solvable problems of our time. We're proud to enrich the collective knowledge base with the first of its kind study documenting literacy key role in equity and economic mobility in families, communities, and our nation as a whole. The problem I see here with their idea, there's now, if everybody was of the same literacy rate, obviously not everybody would be earning a whole lot of money. They're assuming that if you're in the
Yeah.
low literacy rate and become literate, let's say, then you will make a lot more money. That's not necessarily the case. Where are these better paying jobs coming from? If you take everybody in the United States and the 130 million people who are functionally illiterate, and then put them in the highest category, are they suddenly going to get better and bigger jobs?
Yeah, exactly. For example, it's been said that obviously Donald Trump is illiterate, but it's said that Donald Trump doesn't read a lot. He reads business reports, he reads that kind of stuff. But when it comes to, does he sit down and read a book, classic literature or something like that? And the answer is a firm no.
No,
Whereas
he's even read a book.
Kamala Harris, as a lawyer, probably has read many different types of books and possibly even reads for enjoyment.
Well, I have to
Most
tell you the
lawyers
story.
do. That's most lawyers do. That's the only reason I'm saying that, right?
I have to tell you this story because it's kind of amusing. My when one of my kids was in school, they were asked to go home and count up how many books were at home. And in those days, I didn't look like I was. I always looked like a working guy because that's what I was, and I was always in work clothes or other things. Anytime the teacher saw me, I would be like that. Where the other parents were nice casual dressed, I would be in work clothes because that's what I had to wear. And my son had to count how many books we had in the house, and they how many. So my son went home. They said, my dad's got over 200 books or something like that. And the teacher says, "Oh, we don't mean comic books."
Yeah. I've got more than 1,500.
Well, I think their attitudes changed towards me when they had the same son was the students heard Vivaldi's Four Seasons, and they asked the kids what they thought of it, and my son said, "Well, that's my dad's music. He listens to that," and that was I think that was a bit of a shock to them too. I certainly did not make a good impression among the teachers. I don't know why. I guess they prejudged me based by the way I looked.
Or based upon the job that you did, and that's a bad thing to do.
Maybe
I think prejudging anybody based upon job they've done, that's bad. Yeah. Okay, so Karen says many people believe in the education system is dumbing down our children.
Yeah. I'm not so sure that's the truth. I think probably we've taken a direction or two off the main line. The number one thing that the tools you can give children are reading, writing, and arithmetic. In the early days of education, that is what they try to do, is to make you functioning in reading, writing, and arithmetic, so that you could add, subtract, and divide. You can read and write.
Yeah. And the point being is, even if you're 100%, even if you have 100% literacy, which one thing Cuba boasted that at one point, right? That they said we've got 100% literacy in Cuba. But even if you have 100% literacy, it doesn't mean, that you're going to get suddenly a burgeoning new class of geniuses. Most people, there's still going to be many people that, they can write, they can understand the bank statement, etc., until it becomes one of the more technical things. They're not going to understand everything. They understand more simple concepts. They can read and write, but there are still divisions that way because people, there's always issues about reading and writing. Many people, many people who are high functioning readers and writers even somebody once I heard a story about a writer who basically spent his days writing, and so he said, "Oh, so you must read a lot." He says, "Yeah, I read 1 or 2 books a year." He says, "I don't have time. I do a lot of research reading, so I'm going to the library to find out about Costa Rica if his story is based in Costa Rica, or that type of thing." But he says, "That's not reading, that's research for my book." So I read maybe 1 or 2 books a year. That's it.
Well, I don't read a whole lot of books myself. I do read books, but I don't read a whole lot of them. In particular, I don't read a great deal of fiction, although when I do, I usually enjoy it. I am the same, but we read every day. Reading is essential to us. Well, imagine trying to do this show without the ability to read, and read a lot. So I read a lot. I read tons and tons of things every day, but it's not a book. Article, maybe an article on parthenogenesis.
Yeah. Well, and today, actually, I think probably I maybe read 1 book a year, right? I do. I skim read 3 or 4 books. I read seriously about 1 or 2 books a year. That's it. Not very much. And the reason being is that I don't have time. I have tons of time. I'm always researching, doing law, case things, etc. Okay, case law, etc. Reading case law all the time. I'm also reading, well, a lot of my reading right now is about artificial intelligence. I'm looking into the technology of artificial intelligence.
Well, sure.
Because that used to be my field.
So your education has done you well. It's given you the ability to find out things like this.
And not bad.
Okay, go ahead.
And not bad for a dyslexic boy, eh?
Yeah. Now look here what Karen Fraser has put on. Archie, Carol O'Connor spoke 7 languages. That was the star of All in the Family. That was the sort of the semi-ignorant, racist sort of bigot of New York City. Carol O'Connor, he played that part, but in reality, he was a man that spoke 7 languages. But she points out that people believed his character, and they believed. I probably, if they met him on the street, would expect him to be as ignorant as his character was, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, my wife is illiterate in 5 languages. Right, she knows how to speak them, those 5 languages, but she doesn't write in them.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing.
She writes in Roman script, but not in like Indian scripts.
Yes. So says here, because individuals with varying levels of literacy, different in several other ways, such as age, gender, urbanicity, race, ethnicity, and parental education, the authors controlled for these differences and found that while the large income differences between people with different literacy skills shrank, they were still quite large, even given the differences between age and ethnicity, religion, and so on. There we go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And it says here the claim, which I don't know if is true, but because I don't think they laid this is economically feasible to say if all U.S. adults were able to move up to at least level 3 of literacy proficiency, it would generate an additional 2.2 trillion in annual income for the country, equal to 10% of the gross domestic product.
And she's basically saying that the difference for families, for people below literacy level 1 and and those at literacy level 3 is 23,000 a year.
Yes. And by contrast, the gains from eradicating literacy would be relatively small. 5% of local GDP in Washington, D.C., where 47% of the population is non-proficient. Washington, D.C., 47% of the population is non-proficient. Wow. In North Dakota, where there's relatively high-paying opportunities for less educated workers, the individual gains from literacy. So if you are, let's say you're a farmer, and you know how to use machines and plant and learn your skills, the difference of your literacy rates would make very little difference on what you could gain by farming and not farming. You learn
some of that is some of. Well, for example, where the oil patch is, many workers there will earn a lot more money than their, and you don't have to be literate for that.
You have to be somewhat literate because you have to, once you get into the skilled trades, you need more literacy because there are changes and you have to read about them and so on and so forth. But normally, like, so for instance, if you're a roofer, let's say if you're a roofer and you're a damn good roofer, but don't know how to read or write, well, you can roof. You can do all kinds of roofing. Your skill levels are what is paying your salary. Thereafter, though, what you do with that money and how you invest it and how you spend it may have a lot to do about your literacy rates.
Well, and actually, there can be some truly excellent, truly highly literate people who have zero literacy when it comes to things like investing.
Well, I once heard a story. A Scotsman once told me a story about when he was a heavy equipment or a diesel mechanic, a diesel and combustion engine mechanic, and he worked in a shop. And among the graduates that came out of his sort of the same sort of program, they were all mechanics. But one of them was a terrible mechanic. He really wasn't. Really didn't have too much hand-eye coordination. But he was really good with remembering and sorting out parts and doing the logistics of being a mechanic. So he'd be the one that will be able to tell you what part you needed rather than you have to go look it up. So that's what they did with him. They put him in the stores, and he was the guy that did the ordering, and he's the guy that was able to decipher for you what kind of parts you needed and even remember the techniques you need. You didn't have to look at it. If you ran into a problem with a water pump, how do I fix this particular water pump? He would know, but he couldn't do it because his hand-eye coordinations wasn't always that good. So he wasn't really good on the tools, but he was good on other aspects of the logistics of being a mechanic. So there you have it. Somebody whose literacy rates helped him out when his skill rates in other areas were not. He had an alternative, basically. So that, I don't know, that's just one kind of an example. Anyway, the literacy rates in the States are very bad combined compared to other areas of the world. And I don't know. I think you will improve a person's life if you improve their literacy. And there's another factor here that's not brought into it. About 10% of the population has an IQ of 80, around 80, that will always affect their ability to make a living no matter what. So that has to be factored in there. And in fact, the U.S. Army will not take anyone into their army that has an IQ of anything less than 84. So even they will not take a person with low IQ in. So that's a factor also. And I don't know how people like that are protected in our system. People of very low IQ that don't have the abilities to learn how to read, write, or do arithmetic as the rest of us do.
It's an interesting question, and how many of our homeless are highly illiterate? Not all of them, of course,
I doubt very few
because
anymore.
your friend has a relatively good IQ. But I'm talking about in general circumstances. There must be many that are illiterate.
I I would say that most of their literacy rates would compare to everyone else from the people I see there. Most of the people are there because of mental problems and addiction problems. Some are economic. Those people who have had economic problems are usually or could be the ones that have lower literacy rates or lower IQs because uh, uh, they can't manage their finances. But
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot of people with a lot of money can't manage their finances because they just ignore the bottom
yeah.
line. Basically.
Well, financial literacy is another question entirely, and we don't have enough. I don't think we have enough education with that.
No, we certainly
Right.
don't.
Um, and Betty says a lot of homeless ever wonder why they did what they did before being on the street. And there can be some pretty well educated people who are homeless as well. And Betty also points out a lot. COVID did a lot of this. Lost a lot of people their jobs. Absolutely. All right. Want to move on to something else. Trump wants to get Gaza ceasefire before his inauguration.
Yeah, this is a like he has made it very clear through his minions that he wants that settled before he gets into office. And right now, I wonder. Biden has just given Israel a pile more weapons, and he also has given the Ukraine a lot more weapons to set them up for whatever Trump wants to do thereafter. So he's made sure that they can continue warring after he's gone. So Biden has put a stamp on the both wars and wants them to carry on. Otherwise, he would have reduced the weapons. But Trump has made it clear that he doesn't want these wars to continue. He wants them solved. And he is dictating policy already. Like we said yesterday, he's kind of dictating policy to Mexico and Canada with his border policies and stuff like that, waving the big stick of tariff.
Well,
I don't know he
he's
will be able
essentially,
to Israel.
yeah, he's essentially given us 2 months warning of what the new rules are going to be.
Yes, and this is important because Trump is the type of guy that won't announce what he's planning to until he signs it into law. That's part of his technique. He kind of surprises people, but in this case, he's made it very clear he wants that war done with. He wants Gaza all wrapped up.
Yeah.
And he sent people over there to talk to Netanyahu and others. We've got to get this war all done. Right now, there are still some Americans that are held hostage. There's 101 hostages left, and about half of them are dead. The Israelis feel. In fact, the Israelis just killed an American Jewish fellow, I think, recently when attacking one of the Hamas. But anyway, there are people there still alive being held hostage, and Trump wants that settled. He wants those hostages out. This is a very curious thing for Trump. He does not like wars, and I think probably that's the silver lining of having him become the president. Biden seemed to be.
I think that's what a lot of people. You see, I think that's why there's a chunk of people who voted for him, because they actually believe that he will do something to make that, to make that peace happen. He committed to it during his election campaign. He committed to it, and I don't see him wavering from that.
Now it says here why it matters in this particular article. Getting a Gaza deal is one of President Biden's top priorities during his last 2 months. I beg to differ. but the lack of any clear progress in recent weeks suggests it might land on Trump's plate. I don't think Trump's too fussy about taking over the mess that Biden leaves there. Israeli officials believe that the Trump administration might take a different approach to Gaza, specifically on what to do on day one. Well, he wants that war done. And if he wants that war done, he'll get it. Like Netanyahu has pretty much snubbed Biden the whole way. He will not snub Trump. Trump doesn't like Netanyahu in the first place.
He can't afford to snub Trump.
Trump won't put up with it. Biden will. Trump will not put up with it. He'll just say, get it done. So I don't know. Trump is more determined than ever to release the hostages and supports a ceasefire that includes a hostage deal. He wants to see it happen now. Driving the news, this Lindsey Graham speaking on his behalf, basically spoke the Axios after returning from his visit to the Middle East, his second this month, in which he met with Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Prime Minister Netanyahu. Pretty much, he what Trump wants to do is get that Abrahamic Accords up and going again. He wants a deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel. I don't think he's going to have much patience with Netanyahu, and he wants to continue this deal. Well, the Saudis will not accept the deal unless there are provisions for the Palestinians, which the Netanyahu is loath to do. But Trump is a stronger leader than Biden, and he'll make it very clear, this is what I want. And you'll have to do what
I think he will. I think he will. He will not stand for he will not stand for a mess, right? Okay.
Now here's a deal that to give you an idea. Here's a deal that Trump offered Netanyahu. He said, "Look, I'll give you 30%. I'll guarantee you 30% of the West Bank plus East Jerusalem if you sign a peace deal." Netanyahu said he couldn't do it because of the right-wing people in his government, like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. They want all of the West Bank. So Netanyahu couldn't even support Trump's. Trump was very generous with other people's lands, of course. He said, okay, take 30% of the West Bank and take East Jerusalem and leave the rest of the Palestinians. Netanyahu wouldn't even let him do that, or wouldn't agree even to do that.
Right. Want to go back very quickly to something Karen raised. Starting September 2025 in Canada, I'm assuming, students must earn new financial literacy graduation requirement as part of their compulsory grade 10 mathematics course. Students will need to achieve a mark of 70% or higher to pass this new requirement and earn their high school diploma.
That is good. That is good.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Karen. People have been calling for that for a very long time, and I wasn't aware that they were actually doing it.
Yeah. I've been heard about that, but I hadn't seen it. And Betty is okay. Find the video on Trump saying "death to man and woman."
What's that?
Not sure. Betty is saying that they found a video on Trump saying "death to man or woman."
What was that all about, Betty? It was like death.
Probably about Gaza. Probably regarding Gaza.
Yeah. Was he calling for the death of men and women, or he does want the bloodshed to stop? He's one positive thing about Trump is he is opposed to the kind of bloodshed. Remember, once he was given the opportunity by his generals to bomb a certain place in Iran, and he didn't do it because, as he claimed, it would have killed 150 people. That's what his generals told him. I think something in Trump does not like wars, and we're told that demagogues don't like wars. that they don't like because they're uncontrollable. In the end, there are too many variables. I'm not so sure that that can be applied to Trump, but if from all his other rhetoric throughout his time in politics, shows him to be adverse to war, whereas Biden jumped in with both feet.
I think Trump's belief is that war basically stops the economic growth.
Well, Biden used to say stupid things like when they were running out of shells and everything. He pointed out that there was 800,000 people that worked for the arms munitions of the United States, and they're good paying union jobs. So when people complained, they said, well, we're running out of munitions because you're giving them all to Israel and Ukraine. But in this particular case, it was Israel. He turned around and he says, well, we're making them as many as we can. Those are good union paying jobs. In other words, it sounded to me that you needed a war to keep the military industrial complex going. It is a thing that Eisenhower warned us about. There's a lot of money to be made there. And we have found out recently how corrupt the Defense Department spending is. 7 years in a row, they did not, their audit did not.
Okay. So what Trump was saying, death to man. So this is okay. I found this video on Trump saying death to man or women for trafficking children, right?
Oh.
And so if he's the one, I hope our children will be safer. And why war? Yeah, again.
Well, this is a switch back to the border issues. Of course, there are one of the strategies for people smugglers are to bring in children. If you bring in children, they have more rights, but they also put them in a danger. So if you bring in underage children into the country, they have more rights and more consideration. So maybe that's what he's talking about, but that puts the children at risk a lot of times.
It does. Absolutely, it does. Yeah. All right. Just a quick one before we go. Restored George Bukator Park in Chippawa. Bukator. Sorry, wasn't thinking. Yeah. And George Bukator was actually a former mayor.
Do you get your pronunciations from Mr. and Mrs. Bouquet? From that British dish?
Yes, of course. Anyway.
Now, George Bukator's... I don't even know if that's spelled right, is it?
Bukator.
Okay, yeah, okay. So Bukator was a mayor. Yeah, Bukator was a mayor, and I think they had a street named after him too. But anyways, so it's nice to have the park restored. I guess you posted it. You tell us about it.
Well, I think with anything like this, and actually, basically, Chris is saying that he and his brother built his building. So his yoga studio, I'm guessing he means. Yeah, basically, they've restored the park alongside, also known along the follows the truth along the Welland River, and basically this has been kind of going. I guess it's been kind of, I don't know, less than it should have been. And this has been on the actual calendar. I didn't know the name of the park, but this has been on the calendar for about a year now. And so they've actually completed and restored it and opened it. Which, of course, is why...
Where's the park located?
Why Mayor Diodati was there, yeah.
Where's the park located?
It's in Chippawa, along Chippawa Creek.
Yes. So there you go. And I think that's probably good. The restored park there, because
It's for whatever reason during the COVID years, it ended up being trashed. Don't know why.
well, because some people are idiots.
Yes.
Burning down empty
I know.
buildings, trashing things, smashing windows. I don't know what's happening to us, but we have when the councilors and the people of the city vote for councilors, and they try to do things that are good for the city, like making parks so everybody can use them and enjoy them. And somebody comes around and trashes them and makes them, or they get ignored. I don't know what's happening. I'm glad it's restored anyway.
Oh yeah. And basically, apparently, Bukator used to use the bridge. He would go across the old lift bridge and would and basically with his kids after church on a Sunday morning, and then go back and grab the car before picking them up to go home. So it was part and parcel of his lifetime.
Yeah, he's as far as I know, he was a mayor, wasn't he? Not at one time.
Yeah, it was mayor and MPP. Yeah,
yeah. So he was an important figure.
Yeah. Okay. Those storms. Hope you make sure you have safety in the trunk. Awful. Yeah, they have a beach park on the Chippawa Parkway.
Well, this is
yeah. There you go.
I'm afraid Mayor Diodati being there is probably giving him ideas. I wonder the biggest. I wonder if he's got plans for the biggest and most majestic park, Diodati Park, coming anytime soon.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess that's kind of where we're going to have to call it an end. Yeah.
Yes, indeed, everyone. Pray for peace. Without further ado, I bid you adieu.